Value yourself. First, nothing is worth losing your peace. For have you ever made a decision that you knew in the quiet and honest part of yourself that exists beneath the noise of justification and social performance and the specific anxiety of wanting to be seen as someone who does the right thing was a decision that was going to cost you something you could not afford to lose? Not cost you money, not cost you a relationship in the simple sense of its ending, not cost you any of the specific external things that the ordinary vocabulary of loss is designed to capture. But cost you something more intimate and more fundamental than any of those things. Something that you carry not in your possessions or your social world, but in the specific quality of your own inner life, in the specific texture of what it feels like, from the inside, to be you inhabiting your own existence. Something that, once lost, does not return to its previous condition simply because the circumstances that produced the loss have been corrected or resolved. Perhaps it happened in a professional context, in the moment when you agreed to something that violated your own understanding of what you were willing to do and who you were willing to become in order to maintain a position or please a person in authority whose approval felt, in that moment, more urgent than the specific cost of accommodating them. Perhaps it happened in a relationship, in the accumulated series of small surrenders through which you gradually organized your own experience of yourself around the preferences and the judgments and the emotional needs of another person, until the self you were presenting to the world was so thoroughly managed for their approval that the self you were actually living with had become someone you barely recognized. Perhaps it happened in the slower and less dramatic way that it most commonly happens, through the daily accumulation of choices made in the direction of the immediately comfortable and the socially safe and the path of least resistance, until the specific quality of peace that you carried in your best periods, the specific quality of being genuinely at home in your own life, had been so thoroughly displaced by the management of other people's expectations and other people's needs and other people's assessments of who you should be, that you could no longer remember, with any specificity, what it had felt like when it was present. Whatever form it took for you, the experience I am pointing toward is the same. The experience of losing your peace, not losing it in the casual, everyday sense of being temporarily stressed or temporarily anxious or temporarily overwhelmed by the specific demands of a particularly difficult period, but losing it in the deeper and more consequential sense of losing the specific quality of inner stability, of genuine alignment between the life you are living and the values that constitute your deepest self-understanding. That is the experiential foundation of genuine psychological health and genuine human flourishing. The loss that is not a temporary disruption but a structural displacement. A reorganization of your inner life around something other than the specific center that was sustaining it. This loss is one of the most common and most consistently underexamined forms of human suffering in the contemporary world. It is underexamined not because it is subtle, because the people who are experiencing it are often acutely aware of it, but because the culture surrounding it has not developed an adequate vocabulary for naming it, and has in fact developed very effective mechanisms for preventing the naming of it, because the naming of it tends to produce conclusions about the value of specific relationships and specific professional situations and specific social commitments that the people invested in those relationships and situations and commitments find genuinely threatening. The culture of contemporary life tells you in 1,000 different ways and through 1,000 different channels that the loss of your peace is either a personal failing to be addressed through sufficient self-improvement or an inevitable cost to be accepted as the price of participation in the world. The productivity culture tells you that the anxiety and the stress and the specific quality of inner displacement that you are experiencing are problems of insufficient optimization. That the right morning routine or the right mindfulness practice or the right system of personal management will restore the peace that the current conditions are disturbing. The relationship culture tells you that the loss of your peace in your most important relationships is a natural consequence of the genuine demands of genuine love. That peace is a luxury of solitude that must be sacrificed for the richness of genuine intimacy. The professional culture tells you that the specific loss of inner alignment that you experience in the daily performance of work that is not genuinely aligned with your values is simply the adult acceptance of reality, the recognition that meaningful work is for the privileged few and that the rest must make peace with the gap. All of these cultural narratives are wrong in ways that have specific and serious consequences for the specific people who absorb them without examination. And the wrongness is not merely theoretical. It is practical, measurable, and increasingly well documented in the research on what the chronic absence of genuine inner peace actually produces in terms of cognitive function, physical health, relationship quality, and the specific forms of behavioral and psychological pathology that the medical and mental health systems of the most developed societies are increasingly struggling to manage. Chronic psychological stress, of the specific kind that the loss of genuine inner peace over extended periods produces, is not merely an unpleasant experience. It is a biological process that produces measurable and consequential changes in the architecture of the brain, in the function of the immune system, in the regulation of the hormonal systems that govern everything from sleep to reproductive function, to the specific quality of emotional regulation that allows a person to navigate the ordinary demands of daily life without the kind of cascading cognitive and emotional failures that the research on chronic stress consistently identifies as its most serious long-term consequences. The person who has been living without genuine inner peace for an extended period is not merely a person who is unhappy. They are a person whose capacity for genuine connection with other people is compromised, whose capacity for genuine creative and intellectual engagement with the problems and the opportunities of their life is diminished, whose capacity for the specific forms of patience and generosity and genuine presence that the most important relationships in their life most urgently require has been specifically degraded by the chronic activation of the stress response systems that the loss of peace reliably produces. They are, in specific and measurable ways, less capable of living the life they most want to live, precisely because they have sacrificed the inner condition that makes that life possible in the name of maintaining the external circumstances that they believed required the sacrifice. This is the central paradox that the title of this conversation is pointing toward, and it deserves to be stated as directly as possible because it is a paradox that the culture consistently obscures in the direction of the external circumstances rather than the internal condition. The paradox is this: the things that you sacrifice your peace to maintain, the relationships that require you to abandon your own values and your own needs in order to sustain them, the professional situations that require you to perform a version of yourself that is fundamentally misaligned with the person you actually are, the social commitments that require you to present a curated fiction of your life rather than the actual life you are living, these things do not become more worth having as a consequence of the sacrifice you are making to keep them. They become less worth having because the person who is keeping them is a progressively more depleted and progressively more misaligned version of the person who was capable of genuinely engaging with them when the peace was intact. And the peace, which is the specific inner condition that makes genuine engagement with anything genuinely possible, becomes less recoverable the longer it is sacrificed, not because it is permanently destroyed, but because the longer the inner life is organized around the management of external circumstances rather than around genuine alignment with one's own deepest values, the more thoroughly the frameworks and the habits and the self-understanding that constituted the peace in its previous form are replaced by frameworks and habits and self-understanding that are organized around its absence. I want to examine what it actually means to value yourself first, because the phrase is one that the current culture has both overused to the point of near meaninglessness and simultaneously misunderstood in ways that prevent the genuine insight it is trying to convey from being genuinely absorbed by the people who most need to absorb it. Valuing yourself first is not selfishness. It is not the narcissistic prioritization of your own comfort and your own preferences and your own immediate emotional satisfaction over the genuine needs and the genuine well-being of the people you care about. It is not the therapeutic dispensation from genuine self-sacrifice and genuine commitment and genuine willingness to bear the specific costs that genuine love and genuine community and genuine engagement with anything genuinely important consistently require. Valuing yourself first is something more precise and more important than any of those things. It is the recognition that the specific inner condition of genuine psychological health, of genuine alignment between the life you are living and the values that constitute your deepest self-understanding is not a luxury that can be indefinitely deferred while more urgent external matters are attended to. It is the foundation, the specific structural condition of inner life, upon which every other form of genuine contribution to the world you care about, and every other form of genuine connection with the people you love, and every other form of genuine engagement with the things that matter most to you depends. The person who cannot value themselves enough to protect the specific conditions of their own inner peace is not, as a consequence of this failure to prioritize themselves, a more available and more generous contributor to the relationships and the commitments that they are sacrificing the peace to maintain. They are a progressively more depleted and progressively more compromised version of the person whose full presence and full engagement those relationships and commitments most urgently require. The sacrifice is not producing the result it is understood to be producing. It is producing the opposite result, the specific reduction in the quality of genuine presence and genuine care that the person sacrificing themselves most genuinely wants to provide. To understand this more clearly, consider what genuine peace actually is and what it actually produces in the life of a person who genuinely possesses it. Because the absence of precision about what peace actually means is one of the primary sources of the cultural confusion about its value and its priority. Genuine peace is not the absence of difficulty. It is not the elimination of conflict or the avoidance of hard choices or the management of life into a condition of comfortable frictionlessness that requires nothing genuinely demanding of the person inhabiting it. The person who has organized their life around the avoidance of difficulty in the name of maintaining peace has not achieved peace. They have achieved a specific form of stagnation that is organized around the avoidance of the specific discomforts that genuine engagement with anything genuinely important reliably produces. Genuine peace is something more specific and more dynamic than the absence of difficulty. It is the specific quality of inner groundedness that allows a person to engage with genuine difficulty from a position of genuine stability rather than from the fragile and reactive position of someone whose inner life is organized around the management of threat. It is the specific quality of being at home in one's own experience, of the relationship between the life being lived and the values constituting the deepest self-understanding being sufficiently aligned that the experience of one's own existence has a specific quality of coherence and legitimacy that the misalignment of peaceless living consistently destroys. And what this quality actually produces in the specific texture of daily life is not passivity or withdrawal or the comfortable but limited engagement of a person who has organized their inner world around protection rather than genuine opening. It is precisely the opposite. The person who genuinely has their peace, whose inner life is genuinely grounded in the specific quality of alignment we have been describing, is the person who is most capable of the specific forms of genuine engagement that the most important relationships and the most important commitments in their life require. They are the person who can be genuinely present with another person in their difficulty without immediately managing it through the lens of how the other person's difficulty is affecting them. They are the person who can make genuinely difficult choices without the specific cognitive distortion that chronic stress produces. They are the person who can engage with the genuinely demanding dimensions of genuine love and genuine community and genuine intellectual engagement with the most important questions from a position of genuine inner stability rather than the defensive reactivity that the absence of peace reliably produces. The specific contribution that genuine peace makes possible is not the contribution of the person who has made themselves comfortable and protected. It is the contribution of the person who has grounded themselves deeply enough in their own center that they can be genuinely moved by what genuinely deserves to move them without being destabilized by the movement. This is the distinction that the culture most consistently collapses, and that the collapse of which most consistently produces the specific harm of people who believe that sacrificing their peace is the price of genuine love and genuine commitment, when in fact the sacrifice of peace is the specific mechanism that prevents the genuine love and the genuine commitment they are sacrificing it for from being genuinely available in the forms that they most urgently require. Now I want to examine the specific ways in which peace is most commonly lost in the conditions of contemporary life, not as an exhaustive taxonomy of the possible sources of inner displacement, but as a precise identification of the patterns that appear most consistently and most consequentially in the lives of the people who are most clearly and most urgently experiencing the loss we have been discussing. The first and most pervasive source of peace loss in contemporary life is the chronic overcommitment of the self to the management of other people's emotional states. This is a pattern that the culture has made extraordinarily difficult to name directly because it operates under cover of the language of care and love and genuine concern for others, and because the people most susceptible to it are often the people whose genuine care for others is most real and most deep. The person who has organized their inner life around the management of how other people feel about them and about the world, who has developed the specific habit of registering the emotional states of the people around them with a sensitivity that is simultaneously a genuine form of care and a specific form of self-abandonment, who cannot be in a room with someone who is in pain without feeling personally responsible for the resolution of that pain, and personally inadequate if the resolution does not occur. This person is not experiencing the consequences of loving too much. They are experiencing the consequences of a specific pattern of relating that has confused the genuine care for another's well-being with the specific anxious management of another's emotional state in ways that serve neither the person being cared for nor the person doing the caring. The distinction between genuine care and the anxious management of another's emotional state is one of the most important distinctions available for understanding the dynamics of the most common sources of peace loss in relationships, and it is a distinction that the culture of emotional attunement that has emerged from the therapeutic traditions of the last several decades has been, despite its many genuine contributions, systematically imprecise about in ways that have not served the people who have absorbed its frameworks. Genuine care for another person's well-being is compatible with, and in fact, requires, the specific quality of genuine inner groundedness that we have been calling peace. Because the person who is genuinely present with another in their difficulty, rather than anxiously managing that difficulty through the lens of their own need to be adequate, is the person whose peace is sufficiently intact to allow them to be with what is, rather than with the specific version of what is that their management of their own anxiety requires. The anxious management of another's emotional state is not compatible with peace because it is specifically organized around the prioritization of the external condition, the other person's emotional state and its implications for the self, over the internal condition that peace requires. Improving this specific pattern before it has depleted the peace beyond its current level means developing the specific capacity to care genuinely for another person's well-being without taking personal responsibility for their emotional state, which is something that no person can genuinely take responsibility for, and that the attempt to do so consistently and predictably destroys rather than protects. It means learning to be genuinely present with another person's pain without the specific anxious movement toward resolution that the inability to tolerate another's pain in the presence of the self's need to be adequate consistently produces. And it means developing the specific understanding that the genuine care for another's well-being that genuine peace makes possible is more valuable to the people you care about than the anxious management of their emotional states that the loss of peace produces, however much the latter can look, from the outside and sometimes from the inside, like the more caring response. The second source of peace loss is the chronic misalignment between the values that constitute one's deepest self-understanding and the values that the daily performance of one's life is actually organized around. This is perhaps the most structurally consequential source because it operates across the entirety of a person's daily life rather than in specific relationships or specific interactions, and because its slow, accumulative quality makes it extraordinarily difficult to identify until the displacement it has produced has become severe enough to constitute a genuine crisis. The person who has spent years building a professional life that requires the daily performance of values they do not genuinely hold, or a social life that requires the continuous presentation of a version of themselves that is systematically edited to exclude the parts of their actual self that the social world they have chosen does not welcome. or a relationship that requires the ongoing suppression of the specific needs and the specific desires and the specific forms of genuine expression that the relationship cannot accommodate, is a person whose peace is being slowly and systematically displaced, not through any single dramatic event, but through the accumulated weight of small daily misalignments that each feel manageable but that together constitute a fundamental departure from the genuine center. The difficulty of addressing this source is precisely its gradualism. The dramatic misalignment, the sudden requirement to do something that is unambiguously incompatible with one's values, tends to produce a correspondingly dramatic response, a clear sense of violation and a clear motivation to refuse or to exit. The gradual misalignment does not produce this response. It produces instead the specific experience of accommodation, of the daily adjustment of what one is willing to accept and what one is willing to suppress, and what one is willing to perform, that gradually reorganizes the relationship between the self and the values constituting it until the misalignment has become so comprehensive that the restoration of alignment would require the kind of fundamental reconstruction that the accumulated investment in the current arrangement makes genuinely difficult to contemplate. The gradual misalignment is in many respects the more dangerous source of peace loss precisely because of its gradualism, because the very quality that makes it most damaging over time, the slow, incremental nature of the displacement, also makes it most difficult to recognize and most difficult to mobilize genuine response to before the displacement has become severe. And the culture of contemporary life, with its pervasive pressure toward accommodation and its specific valuation of the specific forms of social competence that the management of misalignment requires, provides very little support for the recognition of gradual misalignment as the specific form of harm it actually is. The third source is what I want to call the externalization of worth, the specific pattern of organizing one's sense of one's own value around the assessments and the approvals and the recognitions of external sources rather than around any internal relationship with one's own understanding of what genuinely makes a life worth living. This pattern is the specific mechanism through which the dominant information environment of the current era most effectively destroys the peace of the people most susceptible to its effects, because the specific architecture of the digital platforms that mediate so much of contemporary social life is specifically organized around the production and the management of this pattern. The person whose sense of their own value is primarily constituted by external validation, who experiences their own worth as a direct function of the approvals and the likes and the recognition and the status signals that the external world is providing, is a person whose inner stability is structurally dependent on conditions that are outside their control and that are, in the specific information environment of the current era, specifically organized to be maximally unreliable as a foundation for genuine psychological stability. The social media platform that provides the most immediate and most consistent source of external validation is simultaneously the platform whose algorithm is most specifically organized around the production of the specific emotional state that makes the validation most urgently sought, which is the specific emotional state of insufficient recognition, of not yet having quite enough approval to feel genuinely adequate, of always being slightly short of the specific threshold of external affirmation that would produce the specific felt sense of genuine worth that the system is providing the simulation of without providing the genuine thing. The externalization of worth is one of the most significant and most systematically under-examined sources of the loss of peace in the contemporary world precisely because it is so thoroughly normalized by the dominant culture. The culture of achievement and recognition and the specific forms of social performance that constitute success in the contemporary information environment is a culture that treats the externalization of worth as a natural and even desirable feature of healthy human psychology rather than as the specific vulnerability it actually is. And the people who are most thoroughly embedded in this culture, who have organized the entirety of their self-understanding around the pursuit of external recognition and the management of their presentation to external audiences, are the people whose peace is most thoroughly and most structurally dependent on conditions that the systems providing them have no interest in making stable. Now, I want to address what genuine valuing of the self actually looks like in practice, not as an abstract principle, but as a specific set of orientations and specific set of commitments that constitute the genuine prioritization of inner peace as the foundation rather than the casualty of genuine engagement with the world. The first and most foundational is what I want to call the practice of genuine self-knowledge, not the self-knowledge of a person who has identified their strengths and weaknesses through the lens of what the external world is most interested in measuring, which is the dominant form that the self-knowledge industry produces. But the self-knowledge of a person who has developed a genuine and ongoing relationship with their own actual experience of their own life, with the specific quality of what it feels like to be themselves, inhabiting the specific circumstances of their specific existence, measured not against the standards that the external world is applying, but against the standards of their own deepest understanding of what genuine flourishing for themselves actually requires and consists of. This kind of self-knowledge is developed not primarily through any specific technique or any specific practice in the narrow sense, but through the ongoing commitment to the specific quality of honest reflection that the conditions of genuine self-knowledge require. The commitment to notice, with genuine attention and genuine honesty, which conditions of your daily life reliably produce the specific quality of genuine inner peace, and which conditions reliably produce the specific quality of its absence. Which relationships produce the specific quality of being genuinely known and genuinely accepted, and which relationships produce the specific quality of being managed and performed and edited. Which forms of work and engagement produce the specific quality of genuine contribution, and which produce the specific quality of going through the motions of contribution without the genuine substance. And then to take what you notice seriously enough to allow it to inform the choices you are making about how to organize the specific daily reality of your life, rather than treating it as interesting information that is regrettably incompatible with the demands of the external circumstances you find yourself in. The second is the practice of genuine boundary setting, which is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in the contemporary vocabulary of psychological health. Genuine boundary setting is not primarily a communication strategy or a relationship management technique or the specific assertion of specific limits that you are willing to enforce through specific consequences if violated. It is primarily an internal practice, a specific and ongoing commitment to the recognition of the specific conditions under which your peace is available and the specific conditions under which it is not, and to the organization of your life in ways that prioritize the former and minimize the latter to the extent that the genuine requirements of genuine love and genuine community and genuine engagement with the world you care about allow. The genuine boundary is not a wall. It is not the elimination of the risk of pain or the avoidance of the genuine demands of genuine relationship. It is the specific internal clarity about what you are genuinely willing and genuinely able to offer from a position of genuine inner groundedness, and what you are not able to offer without the specific cost to your own inner condition that makes the offering itself a source of the harm it is trying to prevent. This clarity, which sounds simple when described and is genuinely difficult to develop and maintain in the conditions of real relationships and real professional situations and real social commitments, is the specific foundation of the kind of genuine self-valuing that makes genuine availability to others possible rather than impossible. The person who knows clearly what they are genuinely able to offer without sacrificing the peace that makes the offering genuinely valuable is the person who can offer it with genuine wholeness. The person who does not know this, who offers without clarity about what the offering costs and without the specific discrimination about when the cost is worth paying and when it is not, is the person who eventually has nothing genuine left to offer because the accumulation of costless offerings has depleted the specific inner resource that made any of them valuable. The third is the practice of what I want to call Conscious priority, the deliberate and ongoing examination of the actual priorities that the organization of your daily life reflects, and the honest assessment of whether those actual priorities are aligned with the values that you understand yourself to hold. This is a practice that the productivity culture performs a corrupted version of through the various systems of personal management and time blocking and priority setting that it promotes, but that in its genuine form is something more fundamental and more demanding than any of those systems are designed to produce. The genuine examination of conscious priority requires asking the specific question that the productivity culture most consistently avoids, because its answer is most threatening to the systems that the productivity culture is organized to support. The question is not, how can I more efficiently pursue the priorities I have already identified as most important? It is whether the priorities I have identified as most important are actually the most important things, measured by the standard of what my deepest and most honest understanding of what a genuinely worth living life actually requires, rather than by the standard of what the external world is most rewarding and what the social audience I have been performing for is most recognizing. This question, genuinely asked and genuinely engaged with rather than answered through the rapid production of the most socially acceptable version of the answer, is the question that most reliably reveals the specific ways in which the organization of daily life has been drifting away from the genuine center in the direction of the externally demanded rather than the internally genuine. And the specific discomfort that the genuine answer to it often produces is not evidence that the question was the wrong one to ask. It is evidence that the answer is the right one to have, even when it reveals a gap between the actual and the genuine that requires the kind of reorientation that the current arrangement of external circumstances makes genuinely difficult. The fourth is perhaps the most demanding and the most important, and it is the practice of what I want to call genuine self-compassion, which I want to distinguish carefully from the various corrupted versions of self-compassion that the current culture has made available under that name. Genuine self-compassion is not the self-indulgent avoidance of genuine self-examination under cover of the language of self-acceptance. It is not the permission to remain in conditions of genuine misalignment because the discomfort of addressing the misalignment feels like a violation of the principle of being kind to oneself. It is not the specific form of self-esteem management that treats the experience of genuine self-criticism as inherently pathological rather than as the specific signal it sometimes genuinely is about a genuine departure from one's own genuine values. Genuine self-compassion is something more specific and more valuable than any of those things. It is the specific quality of treating yourself with the same genuine care and the same genuine willingness to hold the full complexity of the situation, including its most difficult and most uncomfortable dimensions, that you would extend to someone you genuinely loved who was navigating the same difficulty. It is the specific orientation of a person who can hold their own failures and their own limitations and their own genuinely regrettable choices with the specific combination of honest acknowledgement and genuine care that genuine healing and genuine growth require, rather than either the defensive avoidance of honest acknowledgement that self-protection demands or the punitive self-criticism that the internalized demands of impossible standards produce. The specific relevance of genuine self-compassion to the project of valuing yourself first and protecting your peace is this. The person who cannot extend to themselves the specific quality of genuine care and genuine honest engagement that genuine self-compassion requires is the person whose relationship with their own experience is organized around the management of threat, rather than around genuine inhabiting of the full reality of their own life. And the management of threat is precisely the orientation that the loss of peace most reliably produces and that the restoration of peace most urgently requires releasing. Now, I want to say something about the specific historical moment in which the project of valuing yourself first and protecting your peace is being undertaken. Because the current moment is not a neutral context for this project. It is a context with specific features that make the project both more urgently important and more structurally difficult than it has been at most previous points in human history. The specific urgency comes from the convergence of forces that we have been examining throughout the series of conversations of which this is a part. The technological transformation that is reshaping the conditions of human work and human identity and human relationship is producing, among its many other effects, a specific and historically unprecedented pressure on the specific inner conditions of peace. The dissolution of the stable frameworks through which previous generations understood their place in the world and the value of their contribution, the replacement of those frameworks with the specific combination of accelerating change and ambient uncertainty and the relentless competition for attentional capture that characterizes the current information environment, the systematic undermining of the genuine community and the genuine privacy and the genuine inner solitude that genuine peace most reliably requires, all of these forces are operating simultaneously on the specific inner condition whose protection is the subject of this conversation. The person who has not developed the specific inner groundedness of genuine self-valuing, whose peace is primarily dependent on the stability of external circumstances that the current moment is systematically destabilizing, is the person who is most vulnerable to the specific forms of psychological and social harm that the coming period of accelerating transformation is most reliably going to produce. And the specific window for developing the inner groundedness that genuine self-valuing requires, the window in which the development is possible before the conditions that make it more difficult than it currently is have fully arrived, is the specific window of the current moment. The structural difficulty comes from the specific architecture of the current information environment, which is, as we have discussed in previous conversations, specifically organized around the exploitation of the specific vulnerabilities that the absence of genuine self-valuing reliably produces. The need for external validation, the anxiety of insufficient recognition, the specific hunger for the felt sense of being genuinely seen and genuinely valuable that the algorithmic environment is extraordinarily effective at simulating without providing the genuine thing. All of these vulnerabilities are more consistently and more effectively exploited by the current information environment than by any previous information environment in human history. And the person who has not developed the specific inner resources that genuine self-valuing provides is the person who is most thoroughly captured by the specific mechanisms of exploitation that the environment is most reliably deploying. I want to pause here and ask you something that I want you to take seriously rather than answer reflexively. When did you last feel genuinely at peace? Not the temporary relief of a difficult situation having been resolved, not the specific pleasure of an enjoyable experience or a good moment in a good day, but the specific quality of genuine inner groundedness, of being genuinely at home in your own experience, of the relationship between the life you are living and the values constituting your deepest self-understanding being sufficiently aligned that the experience of your own existence had the specific quality of coherence and legitimacy that genuine peace consists of. If the answer to that question is recent and specific, if you can identify the conditions of your current life that are producing that quality with sufficient regularity that the question is not difficult to answer, then the project of this conversation for you is the project of understanding those conditions clearly enough to protect them intentionally rather than maintaining them accidentally. If the answer is not recent, if the genuine quality of peace, as I have been describing it, has not been a consistent or even frequent feature of your recent experience, then the question of what has been displacing it and what the restoration of it requires is the most important practical question that the current moment is actually placing before you, regardless of what the information environment is offering as the most urgent question for your attention to address. The restoration of genuine inner peace is not a project that operates on the timescale of the information environment, which is a timescale organized around the urgency of the current news cycle and the current trending topic and the current moment of collective anxiety or collective excitement that the algorithm has determined is most effectively capturing attention today. It operates on the timescale of genuine inner life, which is slower and less dramatic and less immediately legible as meaningful change than the timescale of the information environment, but that is also measured by any standard that takes the quality of lived human experience seriously, significantly more consequential. The person who invests the next year in the serious cultivation of the specific inner conditions of genuine peace, who makes the project of genuine self-valuing the actual organizing priority of their daily choices, rather than one more aspiration that is perpetually deferred in favor of the more urgent demands of the external world, is the person who will be in the most genuinely different and most genuinely better position relative to the specific challenges of the coming period than the person who continues to organize their daily choices around the management of the external circumstances that the external world is most reliably producing as the most urgent priorities. The investment is not comfortable. Nothing that constitutes genuine change in the fundamental organization of a life is comfortable in the short term, because the existing organization, however depleted and however misaligned with one's genuine values, has produced the specific familiarity and the specific predictability that the psyche naturally prefers to the specific uncertainty and the specific demand for genuine reorientation that the restoration of peace requires. But the discomfort of the investment is genuinely different in kind from the discomfort of the peace loss that it is addressing, and the difference matters enormously for the specific motivation required to make the investment seriously rather than superficially. The discomfort of genuine inner work is the discomfort of something that is producing genuine change in the direction of genuine flourishing. The discomfort of ongoing peace loss is the discomfort of something that is producing progressive depletion in the direction of genuine impoverishment. They feel similar in the immediate experience of the discomfort, but they are moving in opposite directions. And developing the specific capacity to recognize the difference between them is itself one of the most important dimensions of the genuine self-knowledge that genuine self-valuing requires. Throughout human history, the people who have most consistently maintained genuine inner peace in conditions of genuine external difficulty have shared certain characteristics that are worth attending to, specifically because the current moment presents genuine external difficulty in forms that are unprecedented in their comprehensiveness and their pace and their specific targeting of the inner conditions that peace requires. They were people who had developed, through some combination of deliberate practice and fortunate circumstance, a genuine relationship with what I want to call the inner witness, the specific quality of aware, honest, non-reactive attention to their own experience that allows the self to be fully present with what is actually happening in the inner life without immediately being captured by the most urgent claim the experience is making on reactive attention. This inner witness is not a dissociative distance from one's own experience. It is the specific quality of genuine presence with experience that is possible only when the experience is not simultaneously managing the response to itself, when there is sufficient space between the experiencing and the responding to allow the responding to emerge from genuine understanding rather than from the automatic reactivity that the experience without that space most naturally produces. And the specific quality of peace that the inner witness enables is not the peace of not being affected by things. It is the peace of being affected by things from a position of genuine groundedness that allows the affectedness to be genuinely felt and genuinely processed rather than defensively managed. They were also people who had developed, through the specific investment in the specific kinds of relationships and specific kinds of practice and specific kinds of engagement with the tradition of human wisdom about the conditions of inner life, the specific community of genuine support that genuine self-valuing requires, and that most people attempting the project in isolation consistently underestimate as a requirement. Genuine self-valuing is not a solitary achievement. It is a relational one, requiring the specific quality of genuine mirroring from specific other people who are capable of seeing and affirming the genuine self rather than the performed self. and the specific quality of genuine challenge from specific other people who are capable of engaging honestly with the ways in which the genuine self is departing from its own deepest values in ways that the self alone is too close to its own habits to clearly recognize. I want to close with something that is not a technique or a strategy or a program for the restoration of peace, but a fundamental reorientation in how the entire question of self-valuing is understood in relation to the people and the world you care most about. The most common objection to the prioritization of genuine inner peace, the objection that the most genuinely caring people most consistently raise against the project of valuing themselves first, is the objection that the people they care about need them now, that the restoration of their own peace is a project for later, when the immediate demands of the people and the situations that need them have been adequately addressed. This objection, which comes from the most genuine place of genuine care for genuine others, is the specific self-defeating logic that produces the specific pattern of depletion we have been examining. It is self-defeating because the people who are most needed most urgently by the most people are precisely the people whose inner peace is most important to protect, because the genuine availability and the genuine care and the genuine presence that makes being needed by others something that the others actually benefit from, rather than simply experiencing as a performance of availability, is available only from the position of genuine inner groundedness. The person who has sacrificed their peace to be available to others is not more available to those others than the person who has protected their peace in order to be genuinely available. They are less available in the specific ways that matter most, because the genuine thing that the others most need from them, the specific quality of genuine presence and genuine care and genuine wisdom and genuine patience and genuine love, is available only from the position of genuine inner peace and is specifically depleted by the sacrifice of that peace in the name of being available. This is the fundamental truth about genuine self-valuing, that the culture of selfless service and the culture of the sacrifice of personal need to external demand and the culture of genuine caring for others as the highest possible expression of genuine love consistently through their specific misunderstanding of what genuine availability to others actually requires, obscure. Nothing is worth losing your peace for, not because your peace is more important than the people and the things you love, but because your peace is the specific condition of your ability to genuinely serve the people and the things you love in the ways that they most genuinely need to be served. Its loss is not the price of genuine love, it is the specific obstacle to it. Value yourself first, not as the first priority in a hierarchy that leaves others behind, but as the specific foundation without which the genuine availability to others that genuine love requires cannot exist. Your peace is not a luxury, it is the ground, and nothing that asks you to abandon the ground is actually offering you something worth standing on.